kind of hitting this motivational roadblock. Um, I took a class over the summer, didn't do too much research into the class, and it burnt me out in all honesty. I took the August LSAT, had a lot of problems with Proctor U before it, really messed with my head, scored 7 points under my average PTs, got a 150. So I'm just, I'm taking November and I'm just trying to keep myself motivated, but I'm also graduating pretty soon. So I'm taking the toughest classes right now and I'm trying to balance everything and having trouble with the motivational aspect.
Sure, sure. Well, thanks for the background there. I'm sorry to hear about what's happened for you on the August LSAT, but
No, no worries.
the good news is that you still have some time to improve significantly. And if everything goes right with ProctorU, maybe you achieve your goal. Regardless, let's do what we can to get your score above your minimum so that even if something went wrong on test day, you'd still end up with a score that you're happy with.
Definitely, definitely.
Now, you mentioned before our call that reading comp was an area of trouble. You want to tell me more about that?
Reading comp is definitely an area of trouble for me. I actually just did a practice section on Lab LR right before this, did pretty well. Only got like 2 or 3 wrong, which is really good for me. But RC, whenever I get to the fourth that I do, not necessarily in the order that they're given, but whenever I get to that fourth one, I just have a lot of trouble getting through it, staying focused in it, and answering the questions well. I usually see the timer ticking down, and I usually have trouble getting through it in general, completing the section.
Gotcha. So okay, so are you saying that fourth passage is tougher because it's fourth and endurance is a factor, or is it the difficulty level of the passage?
I think it's the endurance, and especially using the not the self-paced mode, but the other mode on Law Hub. That's always the fourth section given, so it's the last thing I'm doing, and it's a little taxing at that point.
Right. Well, you definitely want to change up the order because on test day, as you know, reading comp could be first potentially. The sections could be in any order.
Yeah, and I've used self-paced a lot and have put it first or second or third, but still for some reason I can't get myself through that last passage. So that's kind of my main issue. If I get that up, I usually get most of the questions wrong on the last passage too. Usually over 50% of them wrong, which is really bad. I feel like if I can get myself through that fourth passage, I'll be able to really score 3 or 4 points more than when I'm PTing, which is about a 157, which would put me in the 160s. My goal is a 160.
Right. So we're in a good position here because you don't need to improve that much more to reach your minimum. And we have a specific idea of what the problem is. It's reading comp, the fourth passage. So improving endurance on reading comp is one area to work on. Improving your approach to reading comp to help you get more efficient is another thing that we can do.
Yeah. Okay.
So what does your reading comp approach currently look like?
I will spend usually about the first 15 to 30 seconds looking at every passage, reading the first sentence and last sentence, determining my order. Usually I save the AB passage for third and science is last. I'm not a science guy. And I think that's part of the issue. And then I will launch in and then I go global, then local for the questions, and just go passage by passage.
Okay, cool. So as you know, I like global, then local, then inferential.
Yeah.
Why do you read all the passages first though, or skim them all first to look at the first sentence, last sentence, as you said?
I find that some topics they're easier for me to read about and to get through quicker. I know that I need to make the passages interesting for myself and get in the mindset of what can I learn from this, and so I can really be engaged in it. But I think it is easier to do what I'm familiar with first.
Okay, so prior familiarity, you feel like it helps you.
Yeah.
And you said it's taking you 15 to 30 seconds per passage to evaluate, or
Total.
15 to 30
I
total?
go quick. It's a quick
Okay.
process. Yeah. No, I'm not spending 2 minutes doing this.
Okay. Okay, good.
Yeah.
I'm generally hesitant to recommend that, but if it's only taking you 15, 30 seconds and you feel better about it, I'm not going to knock it.
Yeah. First sentence, last sentence. That's all.
Okay. Cool. Now, with that fourth passage, are you feeling time pressure at that point in the section?
Definitely. Yeah. Definitely.
Okay. So we do want to see what we can do to improve your efficiency on those first three passages so that you have adequate time for that fourth passage.
Yeah, definitely.
What do you do in terms of note taking?
Minimum. Very little, none. Maybe if there's something significant like another voice is coming in or a dramatic change in language, I'll note that. But I watched your videos on reading comp and tried the tips you gave, and I found that taking little no notes is more effective. I tried the whole big note thing and it went disastrous.
Cool. Yeah. Okay. What does your reading comp review process look like?
I use the methods that you suggest, Socratic method. So I'll reread everything and try to figure out the base of why I got the question wrong. I noticed that on the passages where I get the main point question wrong, tends to be terrible after that. So usually if that's the issue, then I'll focus more on the main point questions.
Good.
Try to figure out what's wrong.
And you said that science tends to be one that a topic that you don't feel as comfortable with.
Yeah, I'm very, very bad with those.
Have you ever tried drilling science passages?
I've not.
That could be something to explore, just to build up your familiarity with the kinds of science topics that come up. Not that topics will necessarily repeat, but just putting yourself in that position where you're learning about a totally new topic, something that you may have little to no prior familiarity with. Yeah. To give yourself that exposure.
Yeah. And I know that they, especially with the science passages, typically include words that aren't, found in normal English language that are very exclusive to the topic. And I usually get hung up on those words, even though I know that around them there's context or definitions. I still get hung up on that. And I think it's very mental. So I'm trying to get through that. But that's been a big roadblock for me. It still is.
Yeah. One thing you might do in those situations, and this applies to logical reasoning as well, is see if they define the difficult term somewhere in the text, and then hold on to that definition of the term rather than the difficult vocabulary word itself.
Yeah.
So just constantly substitute it for yourself.
I like that. That's smart. I like that a lot.
Another technique you might try is, for these difficult science passages, rewriting the entire passage in simpler language as an exercise. Later, after the fact, of course, under untimed conditions. If you look at any of the deep dive reading comp videos in the course, you'll see where I would do this live in class, rewriting the whole thing in simpler language live in class, as if I were explaining to a 5-year-old.
Yeah.
Just aiming to dumb it down as much as possible. And I still do that today when I'm going through a difficult passage. I'm not super comfortable with science topics either, but I'll try to just caricature it or exaggerate it to be as basic as possible.
Okay.
Just to get through it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm going to do that probably right after this.
Cool. Yeah. Awesome. Do you ever find yourself on those easier passages? Do you find yourself double checking or triple checking things, maybe taking longer on them than you need to?
I'll confirm. I don't know if I want to call it a double check, but on those easier passages that I can really engage myself in, I can blow through it quick. And I usually know where everything is from the questions. So I'll, read the question and I just want to confirm my answer. I'll know which paragraph it's in, and usually around 1 to 3 sentences where it is. I think it's worth it, but I think that's also contributing to the fourth passage problem time-wise.
Sure.
Yeah. So I think it's just like an internal trust deal. I need to get over. But at the same time, I'm going to feel really stupid if I lose points because I didn't spend 10 seconds to go check.
Of course, it's a balance. Yeah. And maybe that's not exactly the spot that you shave off time. maybe you shave off time during your initial read if you're confirming anything during the initial read more than you actually need to.
Yeah. I think I could, on those passages that I can't get super engaged in, but are still, easier than science, I think I can read faster. I think I need to read faster. So I'm going to use the program that you've recommended. Been trying to use that. It's just, I feel like I'm just kind of slogging through it at this point because it's been 5 months,
Yeah.
just like almost every day. And I definitely had some bad practices over the summer in terms of taking breaks, and it was very score heavy mindset. So less of the review and figure out what you did wrong and more of well, you didn't score well. So I'm just trying to change that. And I think all of that's contributing to the issue.
Sure. Well, it sounds like you've got some new potential avenues for exploration based on our conversation here. So I'm hoping that just changing it up a little bit, trying something new, that might help you and give you some hope that, hey, like you can improve on this, you can improve significantly. And everything you've done to this point is still aiding you going forward. You're just refining in these small areas, but you're feeling, I take it that you're feeling pretty good about logic games and logical reasoning.
Yeah, games are pretty easy for me. I've, practiced those a lot. It's just sit down 35 minutes, smack a section. Yeah. Sometimes when it's timed, if there's a really, really difficult game that, uses one or two different types, or sometimes even three, I'll get hung up on those and go overtime because I want to make sure I get it all right and complete it. But for the most part, I can keep it within 35.
Good. And logical reasoning?
Depends on the day, in all honesty. I don't get more than 7 wrong typically. But I find that if I start feeling like I get some wrong, I get in this panicked mind state and I get more wrong and then I worry about the time and it just becomes an ordeal. So my mind state has been a big thing I've been trying to work on, breathing exercises, yoga, mindfulness. Definitely things I didn't practice over the summer that contributed to my 150. But I think I have some good avenues, a little refreshing to keep that score a little more consistent.
Good. Yeah, I was going to recommend exercises like mindfulness to help you let go of whatever happened previously, go forward with a clean slate for whatever is coming next.
Yeah.
That can help.
Kind of what I've been trying. I played a lot of golf over the summer, and it's kind of the same deal. I don't know if you've ever played golf. Hit a bad shot, you got to just forget about it.
Yeah.
So that was honestly helpful as well. So definitely having these more healthy habits have been helping me score better.
Perfect. Yeah. Well, it sounds like you're on a good track moving forward here. You have some new positive habits that you're picking up. You have some new potential approaches for reading comp to try out. What else could I do to support you today?
Honestly, if you just have any tips as to keeping, I don't want to say keeping myself together, but keeping my mind in the right place during the LSAT, especially if like something goes wrong and the proctor, chimes in because that happened, and the proctor would chime in while I was in the middle of something and totally wreck my whole train of thought. So being able to relocate myself quickly was an issue last time. So if I can get some tips for that, that'd be really, really helpful.
Yeah, sure. Well, if that does happen, that's where the mindfulness comes in.
Yeah.
To address whatever you have to address with them, get back to the problem at hand, and just focus on that single problem at hand, not the interruption.
Yeah.
However, I do have another practical piece of advice for you here, which is how to potentially avoid this occurring in the first place. Before the exam even begins, you talk to the proctor and let them know, hey, this is a really important exam. It's very strictly timed. If you need to interrupt me for any reason, whether in the text box or over voice, can you please pause the clock because every second counts. You let them know that up front. You just let them know that up front. You'll have the chance to interact with them before the exam actually begins. And so if you can let them know that, hopefully they honor your request there. They'll agree to initially, of course, but then maybe they forget. Let's hope they don't. At least you're doing everything you can to avoid the possibility of that occurring during a timed section.
I didn't know they had that power.
Yeah.
That's smart. That's really smart. I like that.
And then
Yeah,
you also do whatever you, yeah, awesome.
that'd be so helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
And the other thing I
that
was going to say is that if you, and then aside from that, to avoid any connectivity issues, to potentially plug in your internet with a wired connection with Ethernet to hopefully avoid any tech connection issues with the internet.
yeah, definitely another good idea. I'll definitely talk to the proctor beforehand.
Yeah, just let them know.
Um, yeah, and then logical reasoning. For those really, the really hard questions, especially when it has a longer stimulus. Um, I get a little intimidated by them, and I definitely spend a little extra time panicking. I know it's more of a mindfulness thing, but it leads to usually me second guessing myself and then picking the wrong answer. So, do you have any tips on how to, I guess, be more confident in the answers I pick besides practice? Because I know it's just a practice means confidence thing, but I've done a lot of practice, and those questions still make me a little nervous.
Sure. I mean, those are probably everyone's least favorite type in logical reasoning because they're more wordy, but everything's worth the same. So you're doing more work for the same number of points. Since you mentioned that you like doing things in your chosen order in reading comp, I might recommend the same thing here in logical reasoning, which is you see one of those long stimuli, save it for last, flag it, skip it, come back to it later. That's the first thing I'd say.
Okay.
These are also likely to be parallel reasoning questions or principal application. And so strengthening your approach for those particular question types, getting comfortable with the steps involved. So, for example, in parallels, reading the stimulus, determining the method of reasoning, extracting the general principle out of it, then looking for an answer choice exhibiting the same principle, holding that principle in your head as you scan through the choices. You can also use little tricks like matching the degree of certainty in the arguments, matching the category of things they're discussing in the arguments, like all people versus all people who take the LSAT with that qualifying statement.
Yeah.
So look to match.
I noticed that earlier today when I was doing an LR section, those little changes, and I was making those adjustments, trying to, especially for principal application and parallel, trying to match everything up. But even still, sometimes there's two that kind of have everything matched up, and it comes down to the very small language changes. And those are typically the ones I'll get wrong still.
Yeah. So I would drill those on the side. I would review them in depth using the Socratic review method you see in the logical reasoning workshops in the course. But primarily, I would suggest for you focus on the reading comp, since that is, of course, a third of the exam. It's the greatest number of questions on the exam. And you have some new techniques you can try, and just in terms of how to go about studying it. That'll have a bigger impact than parallel questions, which are only a couple per exam.
Yeah. And I do have a quick question about games, if you don't mind switching gears.
Yeah, sure.
The substitute rule questions kill me. I've spent 5 minutes, still get it wrong. 7 minutes on time section, wrong. Reviewed it, went back to it 3 weeks later, still wrong. Hardest question for me on the LSAT.
Yeah, I hear you. They're actually, and everyone feels like they're pretty hard, but they're actually not that bad. They just seem weird because they're fundamentally appearing to alter the rules of the game. But they're actually looking for a new rule, a new choice that has no consequence at all on the initial setup or on any of the valid scenarios. So you want to look for a choice that's no more limiting and no less limiting than the original rules. Identical consequence. So same inferences as you would have with the original rule.
Yeah. So when I go about these questions, I usually scratch out the rule that they're referring to and write in the different rules that for the answer choices. So I'll make the list. I'll write them out though. And then I usually try to, do analysis on how they stack up and how it affects the games. But I usually just don't get them right. So do you think it would be better if I don't scratch out the initial one and try to, I guess, match per se?
I think it's fine to scratch out the original rule
Yeah.
because the new one's not going to look similar.
Yeah.
It'll have a similar consequence, but it's because of its interaction with the other rules of the game
Okay.
that it will have a similar consequence.
Okay. Yeah. That makes sense.
So I'd recommend seeing, can you derive the same inferences? And using your previous hypotheticals that you've already drawn through the game, will the new rule allow all of those to still exist? And that's what you want to see. Try that. Try using previous work.
Yeah, I'll write out 3 or 4 theoreticals usually, depending on the game. I've never thought about stacking it up against the theoreticals and seeing if it'll still work.
Check. Yeah,
So,
if it makes any of those invalid, it's no good.
That's so smart. That's quick. That's like a minute. Not even. My question's done.
Yeah. Look at, and I have a workshop on these specifically, a full length class just on rule substitution questions. Okay. So take a look at that.
Definitely. Yeah. And then, yeah, I mean, my biggest problem is reading comp and just getting through all of them. If you have any other tips for any of the other kinds, I mean, the history ones usually aren't too bad for me. Those are easier in my opinion. Sometimes the law ones get me, which I know is kind of ironic. But sometimes they can be a little more complex and I get a little, I start rereading a little bit and the time ticks down and I look at the time. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the approaches that I gave you before, like rewriting the entire thing in simpler language, that applies regardless of the topic, right? The topic doesn't matter at all. I know you've heard it before. It's true. Doesn't matter at all, including on reading comp. So try those approaches like I shared for all passage types that give you trouble. And by the way, the law ones, I mean, you haven't been to law school yet, so those aren't necessarily any easier, and they're meant to be on topics that you haven't encountered before. So just like you might not be familiar with the science topics, same deal with law.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense in all honesty. I mean, they are just trying to, challenge us and get us the lowest score possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we got some tricks here to counter them though.
Yeah. Do you have any tips for writing out games quicker? That's the last thing. I can always use more time. I'm usually rushing the fourth game. I'll finish it, but it's a little bit of a rush job. So if you have any, like for physically diagramming it, because I'll write out each rule in the shorthand and then I'll make my 2 to 4 theoreticals and then I'll just go right in. Usually I go in the order they're given, which I know is not the way I should do it. But I just try to blast through them. I don't want to spend time looking at every question before I answer them. So if you have any tips on how I can improve even by 10, 20 seconds.
Sure. So a couple of things that might not be what you're expecting, which is, what if we could allow you to approach the game without doing more diagrams? I don't recommend doing things in your head, but maximizing your use of previous work. Just like we talked about how it can help you for rule substitution questions, it can also help you within a game. So let's say you do your local questions first. So I'm suggesting, again, do questions out of order, like you do for reading comp. And reading comp, it's global, then local. In games, it's the reverse. It's local if questions, then global. And the benefit here is that the work that you've done for the local questions, drawing those diagrams, that can help you avoid making new diagrams for a global question.
Yeah.
So the way to do it faster, maybe to not do it at all, because you've already done the work with the local questions, as well as the correct answer to the orientation question gives you yet another valid scenario that you can use.
Okay. Yeah, that would actually, yeah, that makes sense.
Cool.
It's like I'm doing my theoreticals, but I'm actually doing the questions instead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what you've already drawn could help you avoid drawing more. That saves you time. Then more specifically, when it comes to how do you actually diagram faster, one thing I'd say is you don't always have to number every slot you put down. You don't have to rewrite all the rules for every single local diagram. You can look back to your main diagram as a reference point, but then keep your local diagrams pretty minimal. just enough to get the job done.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
So don't
'Cause I
do
try
more
to,
work
I
than
try
you
to
have
keep
to.
it nice and organized and numbered, and normally I don't even look at the number part, in all
Yeah,
honesty.
organizing is good. I'm just seeing, are there ways that you could shave off time by doing the absolute max that you actually need to?
Yeah, I'm organizing too much though.
Mm-hmm.
So if I, delete the numbers and just keep it dashes and write and, number the questions, of course, I think I'll save 30 seconds per
Cool.
section.
Yeah, try it out. See what happens.
Yeah. Um, all my other questions are admission based, and we have 4 minutes left, so I think I'm going to save this.
Okay, cool.
But I
Well,
just
if
want to say
any,
thank you for the help and for all of the videos and the support. And the YouTube videos are also very helpful. I never would have found you without those. So thank you for releasing all of that valuable information for free.
my pleasure, of course. Glad to help. And by the way, if you do have any admissions questions you wanted to ask now, I'm happy to take some time for that.
Um, I'm worried that I'm coming in late to the cycle because I don't want to apply with my current score. And I'm just a little worried about if schools in my medians are still going to admit me if I apply in December when I get my score back.
Totally fine. December is not late. Taking the November LSAT is totally fine. The cycles have shifted such that the November LSAT is perfectly square in the middle, maybe even a little bit early. More and more people are taking the January LSAT, the February LSAT, and so the cycle's extended, but you're fine.
Okay. And in terms of the writing portion, I believe I wrote a pretty strong writing portion in August. Do you suggest that I write another one? Do I get to pick which one they get? Because I could write something even better, but it could also be, crap.
If you're happy with what you already did, you could leave it there. If you are confident you could do something even better, then sure, do it again. You don't get to pick, but
So
I
they
wouldn't. They just yeah, but I would say honestly, your time is better spent, your efforts better spent focusing on the other parts of your application, like personal statement, resume, and such. If you have spare capacity to do something to improve your application, I'd work on that rather than doing yet another writing sample.
Okay. One last question. How valuable do you think work experience is on a law school resume? Because I'm thinking about taking a year to get experience, work more on the LSAT, and try to get a full ride somewhere, in all honesty, save myself financially from years and years of debt. Do you think that would be a game-changing part of my resume? And assuming, of course, that I get a 170 plus LSAT, because if I take a year off, I need to get over at 170. There's no excuse to not.
Right. Well, depends on what exactly the nature of the work experience is, whether it's going to be a game changer or not.
Yeah.
The 170 plus would probably be a bigger game changer for your admissions chances. And so if taking more time allows you to crack that, right now we've been talking about getting you into the 160s.
Yeah.
If you took another cycle and several more months of study and got into the 170s, that would have a massive impact on your chances getting into better schools, getting more scholarships and such. And so I would make the most of that time for the LSAT. Obviously, I don't think you want to do nothing but LSAT for another year. So if you can do something that's both fun and productive on the work experience side, that'd be pretty cool too.
Yeah, it would definitely be like a legal assistant. I would definitely stay in the field.
Cool. I mean, that's good for exposure.
Yeah.
They're also getting tons of applicants who are legal assistants or paralegals, things of that nature. So I don't know that would be a game changer. It could give you useful exposure to what the practice of law is actually like, though. Yeah. And so that could be useful to have on the resume to show them that you have the exposure, could become the topic for one of your application essays. But the LSAT improvement that you could get from a delay in the cycle would have a bigger impact.
Okay. Yeah. I think I could score over 160 in November.
For sure.
I'm pretty confident about that. No way am I getting the 170. That's just not in the cards, but I'm okay with that for now.
Well, let's do everything we can to get you up for November.
Yeah.
And then you continue refining things for a potential retake afterwards. Let's see if we can get you to the 170s.
Yeah. If I get, maybe a 159 to like a 161, would you suggest I take it in January or February, or should I just submit what I have then? I'm not, my number one school right now is Boulder, which is about like a 163 median, I believe. So I'm not sure if it would be best to delay even longer based on what you said about the cycles.
Getting even just a couple points more by taking it again in January or February, well worth it, especially if you're looking for scholarships. You want to be above their medians for the scholarships.
Yeah, definitely above. That's definitely the goal. All right, cool. I didn't know. I thought November was going to be the end all be all, in all honesty, like do or die kind of deal.
It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be. And 2 to 3 more months of studying to get you even just 2 to 3 points more, well worth it. It could save you tens of thousands in scholarship money.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember what you said, 1 point's $4,000 a scholarship approximately, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of money.
It is. It is. They'll pay you to go. They'll pay you with your points.
They will. So it's worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much. I'm sorry I ran over on time.
No, not at all. No need to apologize. It was great to meet with you. Let me know if you need anything going forward. I'm happy to help.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Steve.
Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.